All right, next up, we've got an article about exercise timing. This didn't even occur to me, and then I read the article, and I have a feeling I know what you're going to say right off the bat, but it's going to be fun anyway. The secret of getting more out of exercise. This is from The Guardian. But the latest science, I'm jumping ahead a little in the article, but the latest science of chrono-exercise, sometimes called chronoactivity, suggests that what really counts isn't what we do or even how we do it, but when we do it. Of course, moving at any time of the day is good, but we now know that our bodies and brains change over the course of 24 hours with chemicals, proteins, and hormones ebbing and flowing almost hour by hour. So perhaps it's hardly surprising that a string of new studies suggests that timing our exercise to optimally match our body's circadian rhythms could reap additional rewards. And that means faster results and less time at the gym. A new study published in the European Journal of Preventative Cardiology found that for those of us wanting to fend off heart disease and stroke, the optimal time of day to move is between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m., and preferably closer to 11 a.m. Quote, "The late morning seems to be the most ideal timing," unquote, explained the study author Gali Albalak. That research found that women appeared to benefit the most, reflecting earlier studies that also found morning to be a particularly effective time for females. A report from Skidmore College in the U.S. found that women who exercised in the morning shed more abdominal fat than women who exercised later in the day. To boot, the female morning movers were also more likely to lower their blood pressure. But when it comes to men, or those with type 2 diabetes, the data shows a different picture. The Skidmore College researchers found that the men who exercised later in the day markedly reduced their blood pressure, cholesterol, body fat, and feelings of fatigue. Multiple studies suggest that afternoon and evening are the best time to do this. Our muscles increase in strength throughout the day, so that by late afternoon, they are at peak fortitude, enabling us to lift more for longer, which means, very simply, that we build muscle more effectively and efficiently and with less perceived effort toward the end of the day. Again, studies indicate that the benefits of resistance and strength training done in the evening are more pronounced for women, although it's not clear why. All right, that's all we're reading of that. Dante, got any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this type of research is fascinating, and it always leads to the initiation of more trials, more specific interventions.
Right, but based on this, I have to completely change the way I'm doing everything. I've got to be running in the morning and lifting weights at night.
Well, I would say at the outset, I still have no strong recommendation, nor would any, clinician have a strong recommendation change after something like this. It just might, I don't know. It might, I think in a conversation with a patient or with a client, who they say, you know what, I feel great in the mornings, but is that a good time to work out? What do you think? What should I be doing? Then this might be a feather in your cap to say, hey, maybe there's a benefit in addition to there's a benefit in terms of cardiovascular risk if you decide to, primarily exercise in the mornings. But
right.
I still don't think this is a recommendation changing, observational study.
Yeah.
So I think at best, just given the nature of it being an observational study, it gives us that foundation for, future interventions to try and make. So I think that's a good segue into some of the limitations. And in my opinion, with the study specifically, the biggest would be, and I'll just quote what they said.
Yeah.
We were not able to retrieve the nature of the observed acceleration. Example, leisure or work-related activity. Although having this information may lead to a better understanding of the observed association, according to the latest WHO report on physical activity, there is no effect difference between leisure or work-related activity on health. And so
Translate
basically,
that. What you mean?
basically what that's saying is they wore these accelerometers, and it essentially just in those 7 days that they were wearing them, it just picked up on when it could tell that they were moving more than baseline.
Got it.
So somebody may have just had a very active job, manual labor, something they're on their feet all the time, and that got flagged so to speak, as their exercise.
Okay.
And yeah, like what the WHO is saying is true. You know, there's no effect difference between leisure or work-related activity on health. I guess that's true, but that's still another example where the overarching body of evidence and the overarching recommendations, even in the physical activity guideline recommendations, that it's still best to find something that's deliberate exercise. You know what I mean? And so with that, there's a, kind of a dose dependent relationship with what you're doing. So, you know, so it's your resistance training 1 day a week. If you push that to 2 days a week, that's great. If you push it to 3 days a week, that might be even better.
Right.
And so all of that's to say, it's a valid point, but I think that that's a huge limitation because you're just seeing how somebody's moving. You don't actually know what they're doing. Like what if we studied people who were on a, very well thought out training program. They were resistance training and covering all major body parts twice a week.
Right.
What kind of outcomes then are you seeing?
Right.
That's what I believe is not been totally parsed out yet. And then also it's like the easy sort of tongue in cheek thing to say is like, well, this is going to discourage this is going to discourage people from their evening workout. It's going to say, well, if it's better in the morning, then what the heck's the point of me?
Well, it said for men, lifting weights at night is better.
Right.
And I can only exercise in the morning. That's the only time that I can do it. So I guess why am I even bothering?
That's right. That's exactly it. Yeah. So it's tough. And then again, there's, in terms of chrono activity, chrono nutrition is another big thing that we've talked about. When should I be eating in relation to exercise or in relation to my hormone levels and all that kind of stuff. Still just a very, nuanced conversation. And for the vast majority of people, it's probably still just a little too complicated when you're talking about just basic behavioral,
a little
lifestyle
too esoteric,
changes.
A little too like playing around the edges.
Definitely.
If you can get the right amount of protein in during the day, that's going to be more impactful than making sure that you eat it within the percent time of round your exercise or whatever.
Right.
Got it.
Right. And then also they even mentioned, if I interpreted this correctly, they followed up on the cardiac and stroke events.
Yep.
During after a 6-year of follow-up, but they only measured the activity over those initial 7 days, I guess.
Oh, wow. So they're drawing some pretty big, broad conclusions based on 7 days.
Yeah. And I don't want to say that just totally like that invalidates what's happening here. I don't know. I think the more information, the type of exercise, if they did this 7-day study every 6 months or, the 7-day activity measurement every 6 months, every 3 months, I don't know. I think that might reveal something else. Like they also didn't take into account like socioeconomic status, which also has a role with cardiovascular rates.
For sure.
They didn't differentiate like necessarily the exercise intensity.
Wow.
So there's so many little things here, and I don't know. So
they're taking a little bit of data and drawing some really broad conclusions and writing headlines based on that.
Sure. I don't know. It's just to like, I don't know. It provides a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. I would say it's for me, who's always interested in this stuff, it's a fascinating thing to think about. And I exercise primarily in the mornings. And so it makes me consider different things.
Sure.
And then also, even if we shift gears away from cardiovascular health outcomes, which this is focused on,
right?
A lot of the other research that's been done looked at things more from a performance standpoint, whereas these are specific health markers. A lot of the studies that look at the chronoactivity differences show that some of the studies show that there might be a bit of a difference in muscle growth in night versus morning training. Might be a little bit better to wait till later in the day, but even a lot of those findings were not incredibly strong.
Right.
You know, it's just, again, it's something to use for future research. And then there was even another one that showed changes in size and strength gains. They were incredibly similar over the long term in people who do stuff in the morning versus doing stuff in the evening. The biggest differences in this that you'll see is if, somebody has been training their whole life in the evening, they're more of a nighttime person, a nightly chronotype, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden their job changes or their family changes and they got to go to everything's in the morning now.
Yeah.
There's some studies that show there's like a 5 to 10% decrease in strength, or 5 to 10% decrease in whatever performance metric that you're looking at in a certain window of time as you're trying to make that change.
That makes sense.
But then you extrapolate that over the long term, which is what we care about.
Right.
There's really not a huge difference.
Fair enough.
So, and then also it's my bias, at least right now in 2023, is a little more of the CrossFit stuff. That's a sport that, we're talking performance, we're talking sport. You go to a competition, you might have multiple events. It might start at 8 a.m. and then you have an event at 3 p.m. And then you have to do one the next day at 8, and maybe there's 3 events, who knows?
Right.
You have to figure out a way to become resilient and just get it done.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be a competitor,
right?
But we have to also, regardless of all this stuff, we have enough, even in terms of an evidence-based perspective, that we are adaptable enough to figure out, if my schedule changes, it's going to take some time. I can go from morning to night, or if my schedule changes, I can go from night to morning. There might be some decrements, some frustrations, some changes in how I perceive how the weight feels or the jogging feels and all that kind of stuff. But the big picture is, we look at this on a long-term trajectory, and there might be some ebbs and flows, but as long as that thing's still going up, that to me is what the overarching research shows, is that there's some things in the minutia that you can nitpick, especially if you're a competitor, running in the morning versus lifting at night, or, if you have a strength session, maybe you do that while you're more fresh, or if running means more to you currently, then front load with running. However you can swing that. There's just a huge conversation to be had about, health metrics, performance metrics, personal preference, convenience, scheduling, somebody's adherence. It's more than just this potentially is going to reduce my
You got a 5% greater gain if you do it at 4:27 p.m.
Right. Yeah, maybe if you work from home and you have, your schedule's very adaptable, or you're a professional athlete and it's all about maximizing. I totally get that. But for the average person who's kind of tied to work and family commitments, I think it's really hard to totally shift decisions based on that. You know? I know Dante covered the nuts and bolts, but for somebody with kids and all those things and 9 to 5-ish type job, it's I know for me, it's morning or bust. There's just, after a long day and then my responsibilities change in the evening, there's just no way.
So the punchline is go exercise. That's the point. It doesn't matter what time it is. Don't let a fun headline like this throw you. It's more important that you exercise. It's more important that you do it consistently over a long period of time. Doesn't matter as much the time of day, but if you're in the top 2% of athletes and you really want to fine tune it, and you're debating whether you get, the chicken thigh versus the chicken leg, and that determines your macros for the week, sure, knock yourself out, change your diet, your exercise schedule based on these chronological factors. But for most people, calm down, folks. It's okay. It's just a headline. It won't hurt you.
Exactly.